Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
So I'm going to have some controversial opinions here. I actually think no controller is a great idea. And I know people in VR think it's a terrible thing, and I understand why they're coming from. I think the philosophy here, which is really cool in terms of design, is it just works, you know? And again, debatable, subjective as well. Like, some people hate it because it doesn't work for them. But I think you just put the headset on. There's a cable, unfortunately, for the battery. But the promise is you put it on and it, quote unquote, just works, right? Like, it does the eye tracking. Your hands are like, they're just right there. You could just use them. And we've gotten to a point where the insider tracking, all these like different algorithms are actually pretty good, and we can do some very decent like UI UX paradigm with just hands.
Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Vision Pros. This episode, we're joined by Clement Boissiere, who in the past worked at Apple and even was a part of the team that brought the Vision Pro to life. After that, he moved on to Meta and then TikTok, and currently he's running his own studio. In this episode, we're going to dive into his background at Apple, at Meta, at TikTok, and dive into his current work, mainly focused on this awesome app called ShaderVision. So a lot of fun topics in this lengthy episode of Vision Pros. I hope you enjoy it. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. By supporting the podcast at either Patreon or on Apple Podcasts, you'll get early access to both Vision Pros and iPad Pros. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show. And another reminder, if you have not yet left a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Every review goes a long way in helping others discover the show. With that, here's my discussion with Clem. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Clem.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for taking the time this morning. And can you share a bit on your background first before we dive into too much?
Yeah. My name is Clem, and basically I used to work in Silicon Valley for a little while. I moved there when I was like 20-ish, early 20s, and got to work on some pretty big stuff at Apple. That was like my first job, and it was like, wow, a lot of stuff to do and pretty impressive. And spent almost 7 years there, which is in tech an eternity.
Right. Yeah.
But I actually really liked it, which is why I stayed. Then went to Meta for a short while, then worked for TikTok and dabbed into the startup world until took a little break. And now I'm actually in France, back in Europe for some time. And I just started my own little company, one-person studio called SXP, which stands for Subjective Experience Studio. Big fan of XR. So that was something that when I was younger, I was really into gaming, but also more on the creation side. I was like, I really want to make these games. It's fun to play them, but I want to also make them.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, my mom would, when you're a kid, you draw stuff, right? Like, you're supposed to draw like, houses and little sun and people. I was drawing like Sonic the Hedgehog level, and she was like, my kid has some problems, I think. But it just kind of drove me like, passion to all this like interactive technology. And gaming is kind of what drove me to do computer science, become a software engineer, and later, I guess, join tech as a career. I did not work for a game studio because I think the naive me didn't realize until later that it was just a very tough industry. Like, it's just like crunching and very low pay because it's a passion job, and very passionate people, but just terrible. So I found this like middle ground, like lucky middle ground with working in big tech for this kind of technology, and it turned out that XR is basically making a game engine, a video game for a simulation for the real world, and virtual world. So it was kind of a good in between.
Very cool. Yeah. What's your current set of like headsets? Is it just the Apple Vision Pro, or do you have other ones lying around?
Yeah. Currently, I'm using the Vision Pro daily. So I have a Quest 3 that I recently got, and I think that's my two main headset. I never had a PSVR, though I thought it's also pretty well done. And I unfortunately so I started with the DK2. I think it's like a pretty common starting point for like hobbyists or people who wanted to get into it. It was pretty cool time. I forgot when that was. It was anyway, it doesn't matter. It was a few years ago now. Almost 10 years, probably more than that. And I moved too much in my life, so I didn't keep them. I feel bad now. I'm like, okay, I have my place. I could actually have them somewhere, but I had to sell them. And it was awesome. It was like super bad resolution, but it just showed the potential. And I was like immediately like, I need to work on this. This is awesome. This is the future.
For sure.
But yeah.
And at your new studio, SXP, what kind of stuff do you hope to create the studio, and why did you go this route versus staying with bigger companies? Like, I'm sure there is appeal at like working at Meta or Apple and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it came from basically willing to be a bit more independent. So I spent most of my career so far building the platform, the operating system, the framework, SDK, developer tools, creator tools. So kind of like giving things to people to build their own experiences. One of my colleagues at Apple had this expression, which I really like. When you build a UI framework, you're basically building the Meta app, like Meta, not Meta, the company, but like the app of all the apps, And it's a big responsibility. And when you fuck up, sorry, I don't know if I can swear. If you mess up,
I will edit that stuff out. Yeah, all good.
Sometimes it comes up. If you mess up, it's impacting so many people because they want to build cool stuff and they can't, and they're very frustrated. And it's also really hard for you, the developer, to see these people not be able to do things and be frustrated on their bugs. So anyway, I was kind of like on that side for a long time. Really enjoyed it. Super cool to see what people can do, what you build. But I was getting more and more interested in going on the other side. So basically on the creation side, like being the creator, the developer, things like that. So that's why I slowly shifted into product world. So even though TikTok was still, when I worked at TikTok, it was still a creation tool. My team basically built a software to do mobile AR. So you can do like the filters, all kind of cool different experience like that. But I got to meet like the people, creating all the art and the funny memes online. And then after that, when I did the startup, it was like purely building products. So like, okay, something that, consumer gets right away. And for this company, SXP Studio, it's kind of a will of going even further in that direction, but with just like my own conviction, in the foreground. Like really, like I believe this is like a happy path for me. Like just to find some cool projects that kind of go at the frontier of what has been done and not done yet. So pushing on mixed reality, this kind of stuff. So I think it's basically 50% like the business side. So like actually, building apps, doing a bit of freelancing, stuff like that. But the other part, which is what I'm a bit more passionate about, is also the artistic side. I really love to me, video games are art. And there's also all kind of cool interactive experience you can build, which create this strong emotion, in people. And, especially in this age of AI, where everything is going to be more and more, fake or not organic, if you want to say it that way. I think something that really makes us, human in this, sea of AI is our subjective experience. Like how do we feel as human? And that's kind of what I want to, focus on. Like how do we make these experiences that are very powerful? And so 50% of the company will be like more on the art side, exploring some probably non-profitable projects but having a lot of fun and meeting some cool people on the way.
Very cool. As someone into video games, are you at all frustrated Apple is being stubborn with hand controllers for Apple Vision Pro?
So I'm going to have some controversial opinions here.
Okay.
I actually think no controller is a great idea. And I know people in VR think it's a terrible thing. And I understand why they're coming from. I think the philosophy here, which is really cool in terms of design, is it just works, you know? And again, debatable, subjective as well. Like some people hate it because it doesn't work for them. But I think you just put the headset on. There's a cable, unfortunately, for the battery.
Yeah.
But the promise is you put it on and it quote unquote just works, right? Like it does the eye tracking. Your hand are like they're just right there. You could just use them. And we've gotten to a point where the inside of tracking, all these like different algorithms are actually pretty good, and we can do some very decent like UI UX paradigm with just hands. That's also why ShaderVision, which we're going to talk about later in the project, does require a keyboard. But my other apps, which I'm exploring for like the art side or gaming, are without controller. Because I think it's also lowering the barrier of entry for people who are not into gaming. I think gaming controllers sometimes, or even remotes, have this kind of like geeky, nerdy, gamey feel, and it can be a turnoff for some people who are like, oh, I don't know how this works. I've never used one of these.
Yeah, the Wii became popular because it was a TV remote style versus a gaming. Yeah, one could think that I know TV remotes. That looks like a TV remote kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a little bit more intuitive, right? There's just like a controller with all these buttons. You don't know what to do. And I play games, so I know what to do. But I can totally see like people who are like neophytes or whatever just be like, oh, I don't know what this is. And so I think Apple actually found a pretty good like trade-off in terms of like a good compromise, a good paradigm for like interaction. And when I go back to my Quest, minus the visual quality, which is not as good, I'm also like quickly frustrated when I use just my hands. And I'm like, I have to point there, or it's just it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So
I get that as a baseline thing. Everything should work without controllers. And then I would still at the same time love for an Apple first party controller as an after, the pro mode where like, a game can work here like on Apple TV, but if you want to hook up a real controller, you have that option to do that. Cause some stuff, it just doesn't work as well. And you miss out on like hand haptics, which is a really cool thing in PSVR, for example. And some of the fast moving quick stuff is much harder. And also having a directional pad, like a joystick, that's very handy just for movement. Like I remember, PSVR 1, we didn't have that with the two move sticks, and people got very creative with how to tell, characters to move. So I'm sure developers could get creative for Apple, but it's at the same time, for some games, the joystick's just very nice,
Yeah. No, I gotcha. I think, something like Beat Saber would be impossible with hand tracking. It's definitely, or like, anything like super precise. Definitely the little...
Yeah, and even Synth Rider, which is on Apple Vision Pro. I have it on PSVR 2. Much better experience in PSVR 2 because as you're riding the wave of the synth, you're riding the synth, it's haptically telling you you're there, and like, there's something about it. But for some games it works great. So hopefully Apple, they do this launch, and in a couple of years they're like, okay, we got the baseline there, and people understand hand tracking. Let's add this other thing to it.
Yeah, if you think about it, like Apple has a kind of weird relationship with gaming. There's some interesting like trivia about Apple and gaming. For example, like did you know that like Halo, like the game from Xbox, was meant to be Apple?
It was on stage with Steve Jobs, the Microsoft bought him out. Yeah, crazy, right?
So funny. And then Unity was initially launched, like the engine, right? Unity engine was launched as like, we're inspired by Final Cut Pro and its design, and it's going to be like Unity is going to be this game engine for Mac. And now look at it; it's just like this cross-platform thing, and you have to pay thousands of dollars to make an app on Vision Pro. But it's it's interesting, and I think Apple had opportunities to make gaming like such a big thing with Apple TV. You mentioned Apple TV, like it's literally like a little gaming console. And what did they do? They gave us Apple TV Remote, which is great, but doesn't work for gaming. And there's always been this question, and they do support third-party controllers, like PlayStation stuff. Like, they got better over time.
They should totally sell a bundle that's like, here's the Apple TV gaming bundle, and it comes with an official controller. And also, the storage model on Apple TV is not conducive to great games because they like offload stuff without you telling it. Like it's very weird.
Yeah, it's a weird situation, and Apple was also pretty absent from GDC, like the Game Developer Conference, and things like that for the longest time. And I think around the time actually when they're like getting ready for Vision Pro and the ARKit was a thing, they came back, and now it's like, okay, like they're trying to, and they did the whole thing as well for like Metal, converting to Metal.
The Mac stuff's really impressive, and that's translating over to iPad, I think, in some ways. But it's still like, does Apple understand about, do they understand games, or just want to like be there for the, like, who at Apple is like a gamer that actually understands this stuff? Like, I don't know if that person is there or not. I know one of the guys has a racing rig, which props that those are fun, but I don't know. And also, how cool it would be if Apple Vision Pro could hook up to a racing rig, which it can't because there's no I/O and there's no Bluetooth racing rig out there. Cause I'm pretty sure, right? That's the thing. Yeah. Anyways, so in gaming, outside of so ShaderVision is kind of the main thing we're going to talk about today. But you've also created a game, Pulsargeist. Tell me about this game. It's out now on Apple Vision Pro, right?
Yeah. So I've made a bunch of little games before. This is, I guess, my technically second commercial game, but I guess like first in a long time. This game was basically something, I always have a list of projects I want to work on. It's just an endless list of things. And there was this hackathon. So hackathon, for people who don't know, is just like this event for people who want to build something very quickly together. Like you usually pick a very short time frame, like 24 hours, 48 hours, set some constraint. For example, here it was like, hey, we have a Vision Pro. What can we do with Vision Pro? Oops, sorry.
Oh, good.
Okay, my phone fell. Cool. So yeah, I was saying, basically, this hackathon. So what can we do with Vision Pro in 48 hours? Let's get a bunch of people together, pool some money to make a prize, get some jury to vote and things like that. So this hackathon was called Vision Hack, and it happened in September. And very last minute, I was like, let's do it. There happened to be a meetup in Paris, so I was like, okay, let's meet some people as well. See some people who are passionate about this. And I was like, hey, we're getting close to Halloween, and I think there's something funny that could be built with, funny and interesting that could be built with, this sensor. And I think the irony of this project is that, and I should probably talk about the project a bit more, but basically it's a horror game that uses, the Vision Pro's sensor abilities to make a new kind of experience. So in VR, we, went from basically, stationary VR. So you have like 3 degrees of freedom. You can move your head up and down, stuff like that. Then we went to 6 DoF, 6 degrees of freedom. You can start to walk around, sometimes tethered, sometimes with cameras. And nowadays with just, the headset standalone. We then did room scale VR with that. So you could basically go in a space, you have your little boundaries that you draw with, the Quest or whatever, and you have a guardian to prevent you from bumping into things. So we did this in a single space usually. And if you want to do something bigger, you had to go to these venues that were like specialized for, huge space VR. We basically have a backpack and maybe you shoot people, or it's like an experience when you walk around, you see some, there's some experience like you can see, for example, Egypt, whatever, in like this big space, and you just feel like you're really immersed into this huge space.
My dream is to rent out a boxing ring and play Creed, which has room scale, and I'd actually play at a boxing ring. Like
that would be pretty epic.
Right?
I like the idea. So I think with the Vision Pro now, we basically have the ability, and also with Quest, we can actually do multi-room scale VR. So we can actually go into different rooms, and it can be at home. So like random person at their place can just play a game. And so I was like, okay, can we use this and mix it with like a game genre, which is, like horror, and find some cool ideas, some cool gameplay ideas around that. And so that's kind of where it came from. And then because I was kind of by myself for this project and it was 48 hours, I was like, okay, what is like the developer way to avoid making 3D assets and whatnot? And I was like, oh, we can probably use the LiDAR, like, all the depth stuff to make this like very scary experience where basically you plunge into the dark. So we scan the environment. We know like where you are. We know your space. And then we just plunge you into a dark version of that. And then by clapping your hand, which is again using hands for like just something fun, you clap your hands and it just like makes this like wave that kind of reveals your surrounding. So it shows like dots of like your environment, like what's under you, what's in front of you. And then mix that with like adding some bad guys that just kind of like lurk around and try to kill you. That was the pitch. And it actually was possible to do in 48 hours. It actually, people really liked it. Got a little prize for it. And I figured, people like it. It's kind of fun. Let's just make it into production and get it to more people. And in doing so, it's been interesting to, again, from the innovation standpoint, like kind of push the boundaries of gaming there. Like, okay, what can we do? What works? What doesn't work with multi-room scale VR? What kind of stuff, with this kind of, user interface, hardware is working, doesn't work. So yeah, it's been like an interesting exploration for me, and also a way to do a game, which I love making games. And so so far the feedback has been pretty good. And we can go back into this if you're interested, but for sure, Vision Pro is not the best platform for mass distribution. And that's where I started because I'm pretty familiar with it, and I wanted to also do the hackathon. But if you actually want to sell a game, you definitely want to do this on Quest.
Yes, or PlayStation VR 2, which
exactly.
has a smaller, much smaller user base. But from reports we hear, they actually have they spend more money. They're like the Apple of like, there's less of them, but they actually want games and buy them. Yeah.
Yeah, if you think about it, like PSVR is the perfect fit. Like it's just people you need to have at the time. You need to have like a pretty beefy computer.
Right.
And there you go. You have a PlayStation, or PlayStation 3, 4, 5, whatever. And then it's very popular for gamers, and people buy a PlayStation to play games. And then on top of that, they also have this very nice experience where you can, daisy chain your HDMI into the TV so people can see what you're doing. And that's like a very nice experience for everyone. It is still like pretty isolating because one person plays, but at least like it's designed with the whole ecosystem and the paradigm, the reason why there's all that of the PlayStation, which is to play games. So yeah, it's a good fit, and that makes sense, I think, for them to be somewhat successful.
Yeah, and yeah, it is. There were some reports with like the game launched on Meta, Quest 2 and 3, and also PSVR 2, which has, as reports have said, such a small user base comparatively, and they're selling more games there because that's where the rumor is like that's where all the adults are with the money, but that's obviously not true. The adults play on Quest, but perhaps PlayStation people are hungrier for that stuff. But anyways, Apple, your time at Apple, what, if anything, can you share about your time there? What kind of projects you worked on before getting into visionOS? Like what you started there at before diving into visionOS world?
Yeah, so I joined, unfortunately, after Steve passed away. I wish I was there when he was still there. That would have been pretty awesome. So it was back in 2013, I think, when I first joined.
Okay. Yeah.
So Apple, no surprise here, but Apple is a very secretive, like secrets everywhere. It's part of the culture, the DNA. There's I have a billion anecdotes I could tell you about, but that would take 3 hours, and I'm sure I would be breaking a billion NDAs as well. But I can tell you a few things. So my first, I guess, quote unquote, big project was, and it's not just me, of course, it's a lot of people, was the Apple Watch. Actually, that was one of the big project at the time. It was one of the new, what they call crown jewel, where they basically have a new kind of hardware, a new platform, and it's like a big deal. And so I joined later because it's these projects, we can talk about this later, but like they take forever because Apple really tries to.
Sure. In 2015 is when that launched, so there's no way Apple Watch started in just 2013. Yeah.
Right. And for Vision Pro, it's a different story. But yeah, it takes forever. And so I joined at the later stage of that project, but it was still kind of what you hear, from the outside, like, like a black curtain with like, you don't know what's behind, and you have to badge your thing like 3 times and sometimes leave your phone behind, stuff like that. So it's like when you get behind the curtain, you're like, oh, the magic is happening here. So that being said, my project wasn't super sexy. It was more about at that point when we joined, it was like, okay, we need anyone's help to make this happen. And so I joined to work on some of the workout stuff. I started working actually in not gaming, but more on the iOS side of things for location and motion. So like basically when you move around, how can we get some data about that?
Yeah.
Privacy respecting way, which I still respect to this day. Apple is doing, like, really trying to not invade your privacy. It does make some of the algorithm a bit less good, but I think the trade-off is you get much better trust from your user, and avoid like terrible data leaks and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so Apple Watch, and then I got into a different team, which was basically making the game stuff, and so I worked on SpriteKit. I don't know if you heard of it. SpriteKit is one of these. Yeah, so SpriteKit and SceneKit, it's like the 2D and 3D game frameworks from Apple. They're built to SpriteKit was to kind of but bring the Apple way of Cocos, which was like a very popular framework for 2D. And SceneKit was kind of like the 3D extension of core animation. Core animation was like bread and butter for Apple for a long time, still is, I think. But SceneKit kind of brought that to the next level, and I think now it's kind of dead, unfortunately. But we have RealityKit, which is the new successor. So SpriteKit was a lot of fun. Turns out, like a lot of people need to do 2D, 3D stuff at Apple. Like, so different teams from different areas come to you and they're like, hey, we need to do this. And it's like, for example, the watch, like, hey, we need to do some new watch faces, some animation for like the workouts or messages. So, hey, we have this new like store that's going to be in message, and we need like to do this like animation, whatever. So one of my achievements actually, which I always tell people, is whenever you go for New Year and it's like, like you're saying Happy New Year to people, like I actually did the fireworks for that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think, I was pretty young. It's not looking super good. But I'm always thinking back of my head, like, how many people this night are just like, having a dying battery because of me. They already put like a few percent left, and they're sending the fireworks, and my very non-optimized code is running and just kills the battery.
Yeah, because it's midnight.
And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Your phone all night. Yeah.
To everyone listening, I'm very sorry.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And so this gaming organization kind of was also like responsible for Metal, working with Unity, Epic, or Unreal, and slowly started to dab into virtual reality, so VR, XR, basically, because it's just a natural connection.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But there was nothing like concretely done. Like there was no like official organization or anything like that, and it became like a real thing. I would say like probably late 2016, early 2017, which is when I more or less shifted to the even more secret Vision Pro, which was not called Vision Pro at all at the time. It was called something else. But yeah, like basically joined that team. And at the scale of Apple, a very small team meant like 200 people.
Right.
Which, like, if you tell this to any like startup, they'll be like, "What the fuck? This is like huge." But 200 people, is at the scale of this company is like very small, and it's like doing everything too. Like you want to be doing software, of course, which is what I was, helping with, but also design, QA, like people doing prototyping, people doing research. It's like optics, like it's like a lot of stuff. And so 200 people quickly is actually like not that much. And it was really fun because you get this like little startup feeling, like you're like it's like a small company in the big company. And I think it's one of my fondest time, honestly, at Apple, like just being like in a very, very small group of people and just trying to figure out like, oh, what are we going to build? Like this is like a lot of unknowns and a lot of fun to uncover, but also there's a deadline to ship something. Yeah, Apple, like to maybe finish on that segment, like Apple, as you probably know, like they don't like to announce stuff early. They've done that a few times, and sometimes it really did not work out for them. I
Air
think the
Power
worst one was, there you go. That's what I was gonna say.
Have you ever used one of those internally?
I think, as far as I'm aware, there was some physical, like physics limits in terms of like making it work. So
fire.
No, I didn't have
stuff,
one.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's just not something I had.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, I'll give you one little trivia story about Apple. So to really emphasize like how secrecy is a big deal. So Swift, the programming language has been now for, again, probably like more than 10 years. Oh my God. It was announced at WWDC a long time ago. So probably on a Monday, I think. And I discovered it with my fellow engineers on that same day. And we had a lab at WWDC, the Apple conference, to basically help developers with, like learning how to do stuff. And what are they going to ask about Swift? And what do we not know about Swift? So I had fun memories with my coworkers being like, oh my God, we have to learn this language in 2 days. This is going to be fun. So yeah, not always like that, but like it's to, need to know kind of thing. Like I was not working on Swift at the time. I didn't really need to know Swift because I was doing like low level stuff.
Yeah.
And Swift was at the time was a bit more like, for this, like, like early like application development, whatever, not so much for operating system or frameworks. But now it is. But it was not at the time. So we had to kind of, learn that. But yeah, like working on the vision stuff was super cool. It grew very fast as well, which is also part of why I left. Like I think, like from 200 people, it went to like more than 2,000 in 2 years, which is giving you the idea of the scale. And as you do this, you dilute the culture a lot in terms of like, again, this small, everyone knows everyone, like we can quickly go like to someone's desk to get something done versus like more formal, big corporation, like bureaucracy and politics and things like that. But really cool people. I think what I so really liked about Apple, and sorry, I'm talking too much about this, but I just, a lot of people there are very passionate. And I think that's something I really like about it too. Like there's something about Apple, like people who really have like, love Steve Jobs and stuff like that. And they want to do quote unquote the right thing, like the right design, the right product, say no to a lot of things. And I think that kind of culture was really present in the early days of Vision Pro. So that was also pretty fun to have all these Apple people kind of like jamming together. But yeah.
And would you work with Mike Rockwell at all, or was he a level above?
Yes, he interviewed me. That was how small it was. Like I had an interview with him. Like I remember his question actually, and he was always asking this. He was like, "What is your superpower? What makes you like different?" And you had to like kind of pitch yourself to. And I remember like like in the early days, like because he would come to our meetings to see the demos and stuff like that. Like I remember being like. Sometimes I was like, I'm a bit frustrated about this. And I would email him, like, hey, Mike, this is something I think is a bit stupid and we should try to fix it. And he would come to my desk and say like, hey, I saw your email. I think you're right. Or, here's the bigger perspective on why this doesn't work. And again, at some point it doesn't scale. So he couldn't do this anymore. But when it launched in 2023, 2024, I guess this year, I messaged him on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, congrats. And he was like, thanks. I was like, okay, I remember you. And yeah, cool. So, I know, well, not close, but like I worked with him a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Mike Rockwell, he seems like I'm confident about Vision Pro's roadmap, at least, because he seems like a guy that's got a plan in mind. Whereas like the iPad, I don't know if there's like an iPad guy like Mike Rockwell is like has his vision versus iPad's kind of stuck in the iOS world with iPhone.
Sorry, what was the question? You guys asked me to be here.
Oh yeah, I guess no real question with that, but yeah.
Okay.
It seems like Vision Pro has a timeline and plan with Mike there.
I mean it's hard because so here's the thing. Something I didn't know because I'm a software guy. When you work on hardware projects, you have to be forward thinking at least 2 years, at least. So currently I lost track. We are at iPhone, 16?
Yeah.
15?
Yeah, 16.
So there's probably people thinking about iPhone like 18 right now. or maybe later, because hardware is just so difficult. Like you have to validate it. You have to like do the manufacturing. You have to anticipate what the industry is going to be, where things are headed. So when you do a roadmap for stuff that's not even invented yet, that's even harder. And again, if you couple all of this together with Apple's will to not show things early, but do the right thing, like really enter the market when they feel like they kind of surveyed it pretty well, understand like how to build something in this industry that kind of makes sense. It just adds time, and Apple has an enormous amount of cash, so they can also allow themselves to take their time, not fire people so much, as far as I heard. So they also have a different way of getting things done. But yeah, it's such a difficult job. Like you have to also. For him, I guess like he has to also fight the secrecy thing, because he cannot do this in a vacuum. Like he has to talk to, I think one of the big partner for Vision Pro is Disney, right? Like they're doing stuff together, so they have to, figure out a way to collaborate and make some content. That's something else which is interesting too. Like I think when you make a platforms nowadays, you don't want what I call like the North Korea effect, where like it's basically empty, or like shiny but like nothing of substance. Sure. So you have to have content. Like content is king, right? So they have to strike deals for people to make stuff, and same for Quest, same for whatever AR glasses are coming next. Like you will need people to build stuff for you. So they had to. He probably had to do this like very difficult work of, like not leaking anything, but still getting some pretty cool partnerships. Mm-hmm. And then like the hardware, like. The display they use for Vision Pro is like one of the top of the industry. It's very expensive. Maybe it got cheaper now with the scale of manufacturing, but it's also like a lot of research, like taking risks, making sure the. Actually, speaking of the Vision Pro, like the front display, that was something that was also very secret. For the longest time, like we didn't really have that. It was really like something that came later, and. It's not something you just change like that. That's also like a big deal to add a freaking display in front of your eyes. So it's a lot of things like that are like very challenging, and so building a roadmap is possible. And again, they have experts in the industry to do that. But it's also a lot of bet. Like you have to take a risk, and so not an easy job.
No,
but I think he's doing his best.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite aspects of Vision Pro that were there in those early days that made it through to the end? You mentioned hand tracking being a core thing. Anything else that like was a core foundational thing that's still there? That's like that's great.
Yeah, without going into details, I think one of the killer feature at the time was the display resolution. There was like ways to simulate that, like if the display was not built yet, you had to find a way to simulate it. But there was some, I think just in general, what I love about tech is the magical moments you have as a user, or when you first try something and you're like, wow, there's just something that I've never seen before, or something that really like leaves a mark on me. I think for VR, so for Vision Pro specifically, having tried VR before, I was like, wow, like this display is just like game changer. Like we're talking about like completely different ballpark. I can read text. I can see this very high resolution rendering of avatars, of environments. So obviously it's not like, Unreal level of like on a beefy PC with a crazy GPU, but it's still, the Apple Silicon stuff is really good. And yeah, so it was just like my first, first thing I saw was just the display. And that's actually the demo they would show to the new hires first, like, hey, check out this. So it's like crazy display. You're like, wow, this is insane. And then, the stuff like hand tracking, the UI, UX paradigm, that took a while to figure out. And actually, I did a lot of user studies. I was one of the few people who did not get motion sick so much.
There you go, yeah.
I would be able to volunteer for a little like roller coaster stuff or whatever, So I call it roller coaster. It's not an actual roller coaster, but it just feels like
there is a roller coaster app in the Vision Pro.
It's very popular.
It's a great app.
It's the worst. Yeah. It's one of the worst possible experience you can design for a VR thing, because it's gonna go against all your senses as a human being. It will make you sick.
Totally.
But people love it.
They do.
And it's just, it just makes sense.
Yeah, it's wild. There's an app that was developed for the iPad back in the day of creating your own roller coasters, and they made that into visionOS to experience those, and wild stuff. And with the displays, you're right, they're phenomenal, and I hope the next generation of the displays can be bigger versions of those same displays to get the binoculars a little bit less, because that was the one thing when I put it on, it's like, oh, the field of view is not as good as the PSVR 2, and that's the one thing I hope that it gets addressed. I know it's a hard problem. In my mind, it's like you just make the displays bigger. Is that how you solve that one? Or
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of things, right? Like you have to. Well, it's like such a small constraint system. Modifying one small thing then breaks something else. It's like, oh well, we have a bigger display, so now we have less battery and we have more heat dissipation to deal with because it's overheating, and it just breaks the CPU, the GPU, and then we have a bad frame rate, and then we make people sick.
Yeah.
Or your hand tracking doesn't work as well. Like it's just it's
so many things. Yeah. Yeah. And as the chips get better, M4 and M5, that stuff will be able to go along with it for the ride, which is cool. And you left Apple when the group grew to around 2,000 people or so. Loon, that was a big part of, like not seeing it through to the end. That was part of the decision there.
Yeah, that's something I sometimes still think about. There's definitely something special about like doing like the full cycle of a project, like especially in a big company. It's actually not that frequent for a big project to be at the beginning and the end. Like usually you'll join like in the middle or the end, or not do the whole thing, especially for such a long time. I mean, I don't regret leaving because I think I got some other experiences from that, learn a lot of stuff from different cultures, different software stack, meeting new people. But I was very impressed by the resilience of the people who worked on this for, I guess, like 7-8 years. And it's remarkable that, these people can do that. There was definitely a party that I was not invited to because I'm no longer a part of that. But it was, it must have been pretty cool. I've had, I think it's what people like to brag about when they are software engineers. Like I have a few projects that I did the full cycle now in my career, and not that one. But at least I think in my mind, I was at the special time of the beginning, which was still pretty cool. And there's definitely like resilience. I'm saying that word because there's definitely like a death march when you go into shipping it. Like when you go into like, okay, like we're exploring whatever to like, hey, like there's a deadline now. We have to ship this.
Exactly.
And it's okay. It's part of the natural cycle of software development. And you have to do it. Like I think one thing, Apple wants to really nail down the design, whatever, but end of the day, you have to get feedback. You have to iterate. That's something that you cannot avoid. Even for the first watch, which I worked on, right? Doing the workout data, so running around, biking, swimming was later, but this kind of stuff, like Apple had to like get people who were disclosed on the project to do the data. So it was so funny because
you paid the run.
A little tidbit here, but like I remember like we had this like running thing, like okay, like this measure like calories, whatever for running, and there was like this data that was bad, and we're like, why is that? And it's because the guy who made the route for the running thing was an engineer who doesn't work out, and he picked a random thing on Google Maps, and it just had this like pretty big bump where people would just keep falling on their bike because it was too high. And so that's why it was bad data. So, and you can always hear the secret, like, oh, secret gym, whatever. So like, yeah, Apple, like they try to have, pretty good user studies, but it's all internal. So like end of the day, they don't get the full grasp of, the entire population, and companies like Meta, Google, like they try to ship early. It's sometimes I love how like it's been a thing where people ship product with the beta label, like, oh, it's a beta, and it just never leaves beta. It's just always a beta. And it's okay because end of the day, people are excited about this, and it feels like when you iterate quickly, you create like this community of people who follow what you're doing, feel like they're being heard. Like, oh, I found a bug against like Oculus Quest. Sorry, it's not Meta Quest now. And oh, they fixed it. That's cool. You know, like, and I said that, you know, and they had like a little like upvote thing, I think, on a website somewhere, like people could upvote the feature they want to be fixed or implemented on Quest. And I remember like Carmack was like, oh yeah, we did that one. We did that one. It's like, yeah, I feel like I'm being heard as a consumer, as a user, as a developer. Yeah. Versus like this black box that Apple can be sometimes. So it's different philosophies, pros and cons. But yeah, I think definitely like, especially like for stuff I'm doing right now, like you cannot afford to be doing like in a vacuum. You have to iterate. You have to show stuff pretty quickly. So yeah, like if you can do projects in like a month or something, that's ideal. And people are actually usually, if you don't do something really shitty, people will still understand that, you know, it's like early, and they'll not like fix it on the bugs that are, you know, there because it's done so quickly.
Yeah. With moving the meta, what did you enjoy most at your time there? This was during Quest 2 days, is that right?
Yeah. So I joined Meta, in 2019. And the reason why was I was being pitched at the time that I would work with Carmack, John Carmack, if you know who he is.
Legendary.
Yes. And I was like, oh my God, you know, this is awesome. The funny thing is, as I joined, he announced he was going to leave. So it's my fault. I'm sorry. No, it's not. It's not me. But yeah, it's okay. Like it was so. Still a fun project that I worked on. But yeah, Meta is the drastic opposite to Apple in terms of culture. They're very open. Well, okay. I want to just point out that my experience, I think, might be very different from what it is today. A lot of things changed. It's called Meta now, so it was called Facebook before. And it was still cool because, yeah, like Meta is all about like building in public. You know, when you were joined as a full-time, and you know, they give you access to this kind of like internal Facebook. It used to be called Workplace. Basically, imagine you have a social network like Facebook with the groups, you know, the friends or whatever, but it's for work. So you can post in a group and you can subscribe to groups, whatever. Like, oh, I want to know what's going on with Horizon Worlds, whatever. Well, I can subscribe to a group and I can leave a comment, a like on people's updates. So it's a very interesting way to do that. And so because of that, it's very open. I think it might be not as much nowadays, but it was like the first thing I did just for fun. My first week there was, let's find code from Zuckerberg back in the early days. And I found it. I found like some very bad PHP from Zuckerberg back in his college days. And then I was like, let's do something completely different. Let's look for sales data from Oculus Quest. And I found it. I found a spreadsheet that was like, here's the sales data for Quest. And I'm not gonna say how it was, but you know, I saw this and I was like, wow, okay, that's really open. And the counter to this is in your contract they tell you you will be an insider trader, so you cannot trade stocks, Facebook stock, when you work there, except for these specific windows where everyone can sell or buy. And it's because like they know like there's just so much openness that people can derive a lot of like, you know, knowledge about what's going to happen. And this openness also comes to some extent with the way people communicate. So speaking of Carmack, Carmack was, I would say, maybe infamous for just having these rants. And it was like really funny, but also very insightful to see sometimes like a post from an exec or whatever, like a guy who was responsible for, let's say, Horizon or some big feature, whatever. And Carmack just dropping in and be like, this is terrible. And then has a huge ass, like paragraph about like why it's terrible. And it's actually like justified. Like he actually spent the time to understand how it works. He would also do like this, like what I call like full stack review. And by full stack, we mean like, we look at the kernel, like the low level stuff, even hardware, all the way to UI. That's Carmack. He was really legendary. He is still, he's just doing different things now. But yeah, so it was very open and completely different from Apple, which is completely closed. So that was a bowl of fresh air. Just like you can talk about your projects in the public, you know, you can see what's going on. But one of the main things you learn when you go there is you have to do a low pass filter, meaning like you have so much noise, so much stuff going on that you cannot just subscribe to all these things. Like you have to like find like the key projects you want to follow, really try to force yourself to not always get this notification for like random things going on, because you also have to do work, right? So yeah, you have to kind of learn to like filter the noise and like figure out like the priority. And then I also think Facebook, the other thing is they optimize the life of the people working there to some crazy extent. So for example, I mean, of course, free food, whatever, but also like, let's say I come into the office and I forgot my keyboard. There's a vending machine that has 3 keyboards. You just put your badge, type the number, whatever, like a soda, right? Like, oh, I want a Coke. It's 30. Okay, put 30. Keyboard falls. That's it. You got a keyboard, and no one asks any question. They also had this very funny thing where developers, we'd have to have a way to track our progress, whatever, like the bugs, so like a bug tracker, right? They use the tracker for everything. Like, oh, you're getting mail. It's something assigned to you. Like, hey, there's a bug assigned to you. Like, you have to pick up mail. Okay, fixed. I got pick it up. Or like, oh, there's like some cleaning that needs to be done here. Like someone spilled a drink. File a bug. Hey, there's this cleaning to be done here, and like someone will show up. It was just like very nerdy. I love that. I really embrace like one of their motto was embrace the nerd, actually, and I get it now. It's really much that. The downside I think of Facebook was like they had also the motto of like move fast and break things, which became later move fast and build stable infrastructure, which basically means don't break things. And you can feel that too, because for example, I mean, I'm talking about stuff that might be more for developers, but they don't have the concept of branch. So like when you push code, it just goes into production. It doesn't go into like, sometimes it does, but like most of the code just goes into production. It will be tested, but it just goes there. So like if you commit something bad, there's a chance you might just break everything. And they always have these epic stories about like an intern first day was like, I'm going to try to change that, and breaks Facebook for, 4 hours, and people call 911 because Facebook doesn't work. True story. It's just, it's ridiculous. And the other flip side, of course, is it's a very, very high pressure environment. Facebook is known to be very tough in terms of like how you're supposed to work hard and get things done, which is also why they balance out like the free stuff and the low friction for engineers and people working full time. So there's a flip side. But yeah, some people love it, some people hate it. It's a very unique culture, that's for sure.
Yeah. In your mind, what's the big thing holding back headsets currently? What big breakthroughs need to happen next in hardware land?
Yeah, it's a tough question. For purely mixed reality, virtual reality, I think it's clearly getting something that can be worn like longer time, right? Like not too heavy. At the end of the day, these products, like it's really much about, can I bring these superpowers to people? Can I bring something that's really unique to the platform that would justify the cost and the high friction of like putting it on and potentially being isolated? So I think there's kind of 2 markets right now. Let's say 2 markets. There's like, basically the display stuff, which is what Apple is doing here, and Quest as well. Like you have a display in front of you, which is pretty much a phone. It's just a phone with like a bunch of optics. And that's going to be definitely like more convenient for gaming. That's been proven to be like one of the top use case. And then a lot of business side of things, like if you were, HoloLens is not a display thing, but it was also very popular for business. I think for Vision Pro, actually, I have a pretty good feeling that it's also going that route. Without quoting anyone here, I think it's definitely where they're pushing it. Like it's more on the like your B2B, B2C2B or something like that. Like it's a bit more where the use cases are. Unfortunately, when you have a display, an opaque display, it does immediately reduce the areas where you can actually deploy it. Like if you go to a factory with like dangerous like things that can cut you,
right?
You have to have a display that's see-through. Like you cannot allow like any frames of like darkness because it's too dangerous, right? But yeah, so it's gonna be, I think, different gaming is already a thing. There's basically, I think what Apple is also doing is the bet that they can build a new computer, like a new kind of paradigm for using computers, and that's something kind of what they're pitching to right now with like the remote desktop. That's like the system is also completely designed to be, compatible with a mouse, trackpad, and keyboard. You can seamlessly just this is really magical too. Like you can use your mouse, just go from the desktop to an app in 3D and things like that. There's going to be, I think, some other cool productivity stuff for people who want to develop on it. But again, it goes back to the weight. I think like if it's not comfortable to wear it, and then you have eye strain because it's too close to your eyes, this kind of stuff is still, I think, one of the major problem. So end of the day, I would say to answer your question, I think cost, ergonomics, and basically, continue to develop the ecosystem, make it even more integrated to, the desktop paradigm, like basically being productive kind of paradigm.
Yeah.
And gaming, of course.
Right.
So it comes to power, things like that.
Yeah. The eye health thing's just such a curious. I'm just baffled how the people there work on that stuff, because I know, like, if you're looking at something up close to your eyes, your cellular muscle will spasm because of, being, in use, deployed. And when you're looking at in distance vision, it's totally relaxed and that muscle's not working at all. And I have no idea how VR headsets, it feels like to me that it tricks your muscle into not being employed in more distance vision, but I don't know how that all works. I'm sure, were there eye health like people on the different teams at Meta at Apple, like working on that kind of stuff, like to your knowledge?
I think so. I mean, like one of the major challenge actually for this kind of hardware is on a phone today. Actually, Apple does a good job on all the accessibility stuff, right? They have a lot of ways to use your phone. If you have disabilities, if you have, whether it's like your hands, your eyes, hearing, all kind of different things. When you put something in your face where like vision is the main, interaction starting point, you have to nail down these situations. And turns out that for vision, I don't have the latest figures. I'm just quoting something I remember from like a long time ago. But we're looking into like double-digit % of people who are affected by some kind of vision, either condition or issue or something that basically could impact their experience using a headset.
Right.
And by two-figure, I mean like 20%, maybe a bit more than that. So there's definitely, and that doesn't include, of course, all the stuff like motion sickness.
And you want to design your product so you don't add to that number and put more people in glasses that otherwise wouldn't need them.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the fact there's the insert for vision.
Sure.
Right? That's like a little detail that makes a big difference for ergonomic, because now I can just have the perfect thing for my vision. I don't have to squeeze my glasses in the middle. But if I want to share it with someone else, now how does that work? Like, they cannot use my insert. They might not have their own prescription ready. It's a bit tricky.
Yeah. I know there's one company that has it where the diopters will change internally on the headset, and you could like do a vision test with the headset, just changes per user type thing. But I'm not sure if that tech would work on this high-end display technology, if it's good enough for Apple standards and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah,
I was talking to a friend about this. It's interesting, if we can correct some of the vision issue with just purely hardware. I mean, the one thing people do, I keep saying we, but I don't work on this anymore. No, hardware at least. The thing people do in the industry right now is IPD. Of course, that's the basic one. So basically the distance between the two people, right? And I love how Apple just like nicely does it for you like that. It's pretty cool. I believe the Quest, I don't know actually if the Quest still has it. Like at some point it was like you could adjust it, then it became kind of fixed to a few like discrete setup.
Yeah, and PSR2 has a knob on there is where you can just move it around as needed.
Yeah, that's something else that also brings down the cost, unfortunately. Like if you remove the moving pieces, make it a bit more like easy to manufacture, stuff like that. But then you'd lose again like on the experience for this 20% of people.
Yeah. As far as visionOS 2.2, have you had a chance to play around with this new virtual display stuff?
Oh, yeah. I was very excited to see, they announced the ultra-wide remote desktop at WWDC, I believe. And I was like super excited for that. But it was like, is it going to be there at the next update? And it was never there. And then finally it came out in 2.2. So immediately I was like, okay, let's just update. And then they also told me like you have to get macOS 15 something, Sequoia. And I was like, I usually don't install the latest Mac
Yep.
OS until the year after. But you know what? I'm gonna trust them on this one. So here I am on Sequoia. It's actually not too bad. But yeah, it was. I think actually, I may have said this on social media, but I think it's one of the killer feature too. It's a killer feature, like to have this huge display with high quality text and texture. Very like, I think for people who do this kind of job, like coding, whatever, like you want to be in the zone, you want to focus. So if you again abstract, unfortunately, like the weight, whatever, the a bit warm, whatever, it is like absolutely amazing to have that, like to focus, get things done. So I can see how again they're pushing towards the paradigm of like new computer kind of thing. And again, I can't talk about it too much, but as far as I remember from my days there, I think there will be more cool stuff like that. So I'm excited to see that come out, and I think it's just the top of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's so good. Stuff. And I haven't had any of the input errors where on the visionOS 1 version, it'd be like, we reconnecting a minute later, we're fixed now. But that hasn't happened since this update, so. That's
also the audio. Yeah, the audio like just magically passed through the Mac audio. That's like a big difference to it. It just makes it like, and it's really cool because like the little nuance they added was when you play music from Spotify, whatever, like it will be spatial audio. So like it will be coming from your display, which again is a small thing, but like these small details is really what I think make a difference. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for PlayStation Remote Play via the Mac and Virtual Display. It currently is broken with the beta of Mac OS, but hopefully eventually it starts working again. But having the audio there and the better, lag time and stuff, I think that'll be cool playing PlayStation flat screen games that way through the Mac. Yeah. Are you just using normal bands, or have you gone comfort modding crazy like other people?
I got a little bag here with all my experiments. I don't have a 3D printer anymore, but I have tried a couple of them so far. I have the Anna Pro. I'm not sure if it's V2 or not.
I've heard about this.
Anna Pro,
it just launched.
Yeah, Anna Pro. Yeah, so I bought that one, and it was okay. Actually, it works okay. It lets you use the light seal, which is kind of nice for immersion. However, that one did give me this like burning feeling here after 2 hours.
Yeah, in your forehead.
And I'm not sure why, but it's just a big bummer. And currently, I am using, I'm not going to drop my phone this time, I'm using the global cluster. This is not a paid promotion.
Sure.
I actually, it looks terrible. Sorry for whoever.
Yeah, so that uses both their thing plus the SoloNet, which is interesting. It uses both simultaneously.
Yes. So this is me adding it just for extra comfort. And also because I don't, to be honest, like again,
you don't trust
quality,
it, totally.
But it pinches right there. I don't want it to drop, so I'm keeping the original loop.
That's cool. Yeah.
But that one actually, to me, is the best. The global cluster. Sorry. However, you cannot use the lights yet. So now you go back to something that has like more light, pollution, whatever, reflection. But in a way, I was actually pleasantly surprised when I did it that way because it almost feels like glasses, It's like
peripheral vision's there, right?
Yeah. It's actually for some experiences it doesn't make sense, like watching a movie, whatever. But for again day-to-day work, and I try to work in the headset like several hours per day, it's fine. So for me, like that one was definitely pretty good. I haven't tried the latest Belkin, whatever, strap, but I can see how maybe that would be also improvement for the comfort.
You were probably at Apple before they were finalizing hardware design. I'd imagine they're aware of weight being a concern.
Yeah. It's I honestly, I'm not sure what happened here, but I can see how they're like, okay, guys, we have to fix this. That's gonna be a big one for the next. But I mean, like anything, the Apple loves to go. Well, now Johnny Ive is gone, but like they love to go thinner. That's always like the little joke for not joke, but like the little thing they're looking for, like how can we make things thinner.
Before I got the top strap, my cheeks were just like, oh, this is just like, what is, they're so sore after like using it. It's like,
yeah, honestly, that's still the thing for most headsets, I think, unfortunately, like just like the, taking it out and like, oof, I can breathe a little bit. Yeah,
totally. Vision Pro launched in France. Yes. As part of the launches.
Yes. I bought mine in the US, so it was okay, but it launched in France, I think,
in like June or whatever.
A few months ago. So not on launch like in the US and Canada, but a bit later. I saw it at the Apple Store in one of the locations here in Paris. And I mean, there's some people who are pretty motivated about it here. I met some folks who have one. We did the hackathon, and it's I think in France somehow people love Apple products. Oh, it's like a love-hate relationship. There's like people who will say like, oh, it's too expensive, whatever. On the other hand, people are like, ooh, it's fancy. I like the Apple product. It's better, or whatever. So it's an interesting cultural thing here. But it's it's here, and I know people are buying it. The stupid thing too is, for some reason, Apple loves to jack up the price in euros for some reason. Like,
yes,
so the dollar, it's like 34 or 3,500. Here it's like 4,000 euros. And
yeah,
like,
I think
okay,
it's to protect the conversion rates, so they don't have to change the product ever. So it's like, let's lock it in now in case it goes up. We're good.
So there's no tax after, like the tax is included, right? So like in the US and there for a while, like it's just like a little surprise after you buy it. But like the conversion is like above 1-to-1, and it's just not fair.
Sure, yeah.
For USD to
yeah. So let's dive into ShaderVision. Give me the quick elevator pitch for what this app is and who it's for.
Yeah, so I was going to joke about this and say there's no pitch for this app, but
right.
It's pretty much So again, this project is very much niche for a niche platform and for niche users. So it was inspired by this other software I like, which is called CodeLife and ShaderToy. So these two programs are respectively basically the same thing, but for 2D. So like I can write my visual effects with pure code and then share with people, and I can stay in my visuals as I code, which I think is really cool. So it's like just very fast iteration. I can change my code, see immediately like the change, and I have this nice little ecosystem, little platform to build it and share with people. So it came from there, and it's definitely very technical. People who use this kind of stuff are people who know how to write shaders. And because nowadays, I think we see more and more no-code solution, which I don't really like the expression no-code, because at the end of the day, it is still code. It's just a higher level of abstraction. And in some cases, it's actually code. It's just masquerading as like a graph. It is code. So people will use like these graphs to build like VFX and whatnot. But this is like going back to the basics of using like, a hardcore programming language to do that. And so, I was kind of like ramping up to the platform. Like, yes, I worked on it before, but it changed a little bit. And so I was kind of like trying to catch up to how things work. What are the gotchas? What are the things that are not available? I actually spent a lot of time just kind of banging my head on the wall, trying to figure out why things were not working, and go like in paths that Apple doesn't want you to go to, and then basically being nicely told like, don't go there. So that app was me ramping up on the platform. And so I was just having fun doing this. I was like, oh, that would be cool. It would be cool to have this app, CodeLife, whatever, but in immersive, environment. So I can have my visual effect around me. It's also pretty magical to see one. I mean, you see this kind of stuff all the time on social media, people posting some cool art of like they did like, some animation or whatever. So what if you could do this, but in headset? So like it's pretty much like a little, a cool thing, right? And so I built it to learn the platform, and it quickly grew into an actual app. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should just also go full cycle again. I like full cycles. Let's go into full cycle and actually ship it. And that can be like the first app on Vision Pro, and it will probably be doing terrible because it's so niche and niche platform, like I said. But it actually turned out to do okay. Like people actually dig into it. It got featured by Apple, which I did not expect. That's also something that I think they're changing now. But like in the past, it was kind of like out of nowhere. You look at your stats and you're like, what is this huge spike in my numbers here? And it's like, oh, okay, Apple did something. That's nice. Okay. And then you say thank you, and they're like, yeah, sure. But yeah, so it was it was a lot of fun. Like, I like to follow the happy path when I can in life. And I think, it was just like a lot of fun building it and kind of experimenting with these new things you get from, again, this hardware. So on the 2D thing, it's pretty much like, okay, like I have maybe like a video frame for my webcam. I have the microphone. I have maybe some data, whatever, from the internet. But here I can bring, like myself into the experience. I can be using my position, my hands position, my fingers, my environment to build the effect. And that's the kind of stuff we also kind of did a little bit with TikTok when we built the AR creation tool, but it was mobile AR. So it's more like, like the mobile AR, which is kind of dying, unfortunately, is pretty much like, I have this magnifying lens in front of me, which is my phone, and I'm enhancing the world of myself, especially for social media, to do some cool effects. And that's already pretty fun, but it's very much limited to this screen, right? So now I'm stepping inside of it. So yeah, kind of exploring that, building some MVP that would be like pretty fun to ship. And actually, I had a ShaderVision ready for visionOS 1, but I did not release it because I thought it was not good enough. And for visionOS 2, they came up with the pass-through feature. So you can basically have your app render content with the pass-through. So before you had to, like if you do a special effects, just to simplify, it would be like a black screen. Like you would be like in this like purely VR environment, and you can do some cool stuff. But adding the pass-through, I think, is so much more magical because I can have my effects just like floating around me, and I can see my environment, and it's really cool. So that's also why I was like, okay, let's actually ship it. Now we have a better reason to do so, and even more stuff to build with that. Yeah, that's kind of like the super long pitch. Sorry for ShaderVision.
Yeah,
just very niche developer tool for having fun building visual effects in shader code.
So with ShaderVision, what kind of applications can take advantage of shader programming? Like, I'm guessing this extends past just pure gaming, right?
Yeah, so shader programming is used for all kind of stuff. It's used for obviously gaming. It's also used for technically all this AI stuff is like this shaders in a way. The program, a shader is basically like a GPU program, right? So you just program the GPU, which is a bit different from regular CPU whatever program. So ShaderVision is a bit more. It's also used for some of the demo scene, so like people trying to do art or music visualizer, stuff like that, and also artists, people who want to make art and kind of know what they're doing and want to do some cool stuff with that. So definitely ShaderVision is more for the latter, like the people who want to have fun, people who want to do some art, or what I'm hoping in the future update. So like the music visualizer. I think it's missing right now. There's no way to take audio as an input, but it's definitely a big update I want to do in the future. But that being said, the shader code you write technically could be used for your game or your application. So in a way, the fast iteration that you have from ShaderVision is helpful for prototyping as well. Like if you want to try something out, some of the people who reach out to me to give feedback, they told me like, oh, right now I'm actually working on Metal a lot because sometimes I have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Metal is not the most favorite language. Apple loves to do think different for some of their APIs and frameworks, and most of the people who do shader programming, they will use something else. They will use GLSL or HSL. There you go, which is the Microsoft one. So MSL, Metal Shading Language, is not as popular, but it's still a good one. And to be frank, it's also not that different. It's similar paradigms. It's just like some small little difference. So yeah, it's been mainly for that. And you could, again, if you know what you're doing, you could use the code. Pretty much the way ShaderVision work is I do all the boring pipelining of, like how you should organize your code to execute this shader stuff. And I very quickly let you iterate by showing you the compiler errors, let you change some little input variables and even output variables as well, what goes in, what comes out, stuff like that. But if you know what you're doing, there's no surprise. Actually, you have to kind of know what you're doing to understand the flow of the code and everything. So technically, yeah, you could copy paste, and then there's also, of course, like a file somewhere you can also like inspect. Actually, keep the .metal file so you can actually have the raw file, and yeah, so you could use it for your project if you wanted to. But there's no, as far as I've done so far, there's no like export, like export to a standalone application. That's not a thing. I guess it could be, but it's not a thing right now.
So yeah, right now it's copy that file, and it can go in Xcode. It just takes a little bit of work. Like Xcode needs Metal, is that right, or can it understand that code natively?
It can, yeah.
Okay.
There's going to be color syntax color and stuff like that, and you can write different type of shaders. You will get autocomplete, which sadly I don't have right now. It's a bit more complicated than I thought to do the autocomplete, but at least for a full language, I just do like some of the keywords, which is pretty basic. But yeah, you would use like actually you probably have to use Xcode tooling to use Metal. There's no it's not cross-platform as far as I know, but I could be wrong on that.
Right. Okay. And then first off, so if you're not a developer, I'd still encourage you to download it, because it is a lot of fun just looking at the gallery and loading up all these examples. Like there's this like lava lamp thing that's floating, and the hand tracking stuff's really cool. One thing I haven't figured out how to do is actually reposition like the globe and stuff in the examples. Like it kind of like when you load up your examples, it's just there. What's the trick there that I'm missing?
Yeah. So currently it's pretty dumb, if I may say so. Like it just has a position in 3D space, for example, and it's hard coded.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Meaning it's just like it's set in stone. It's like, okay, this is where it is. Actually, that's something I wanted to change in the future. You could make the code so that it pops somewhere specific, but yeah, I think there's some stuff I could add. For example, to initialize the position of something based on some initial condition. For example, like where am I standing right now in the 3D space? Like, am I sitting down? So maybe put it like in front of me, like a bit lower. Am I standing up? So put it a bit higher. Things like that. There's probably, I saw like someone was asking me like, could we get the planes from the wall so I can change my walls into something else? And I was like, that's a good idea. We could do this, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. And I think the gallery and templates are there to help developers kind of play around with solid code that you've built up. What other recommendations do you have for new developers in the space to learn? I know you have a lot of documentation as well, which is probably a great place to start,
Yeah. The samples are both a way for people to, I think, sometimes people don't know about this kind of things. Well, often, I guess, in my case, but like, they don't know about shader programming. They see the video maybe on the App Store, like, oh, this looks cool. I heard of VFX, like I'm curious, like to see what's up with this thing. And then they see, like, okay, it's running in front of me, which is pretty magical. It's pretty seamless. Like you just get transitioned into this right away. And I used to actually, from a design standpoint, I used to show the code right away. It was like, here's the code, and then the thing is running at the same time. And I was like, maybe it's too scary. Let's actually go the other way. We show the fun stuff, and then if people are curious and they want to kind of see what's under the hood, they can do that. And then there's other websites that actually try to teach you how to do shader programming. Some people have done a great job at teaching people with like a lot of interactive tutorials and much better explaining than mine, which is a bit more technical. But I think it's also the point of like showing, and for my samples, some of them I overly explain what is happening. Try to really like classic like developer tutorial, like comments everywhere, like this is what's going on, like line by line, kind of thing. But with the aspect of like quick iteration, you can kind of tinker around, like, okay, let's change something, see what happens, and it will immediately change. So like it actually helps you understand a lot of that stuff. But one of the major feedback I got was, okay, this is cool, and I'm a complete newbie. I don't know anything about this. The tutorial are still a bit, assuming that you know about shader. And so folks were like, hey, could you actually do like a bunch of samples or even like a different mode where you kind of teach people? So like you go the step further, and similar to this website, which are beautifully crafted, also craft an experience that kind of guides the user, step by step to understand what's going on. I think that could actually be cool. It takes time, and also like the design here is not purely also like visual and technical, which is kind of what I do, but also like teaching design. I don't know if it's a thing, but like it's figuring out like what people might struggle with, like go in their shoe to really like guide them properly. And I think like people sometimes just get excited by something. It's like, wow, this is so cool. Like how is it made? Like, it's not everyone feel things that way. The same way like me when I was a kid, I played video games, and I was like, how do you make this? Like I think a lot of people are not necessarily thinking that, or maybe just like, I would love to make a game one day, but just kind of like a thought. But for me, it was like it became an obsession. I was like, I want to make this. So I think it's cool to have these applications like that, like ShaderVision, who bring this little spark in some people, like an inspiration. And I think it's inspiring, both from the artistic standpoint, where like you can kind of like, if you don't know anything and you just want to see some cool VFX in an immersive way. I mean, the effects are like still not that many, and I'm not a wizard in shader programming compared to other folks. But there's some cool stuff where you can honestly, I think this is the point of demo scene. Like demo scene is also like, minus the fact they also go crazy on the technical side, both for the output and also for some small details. Like for example, like they'll do crazy VFX, whatever, for a few kilobytes. Which is like, kilobytes is a thing of the past now. We're talking about gigabytes or terabytes or more now. But like they will put some stupid constraint, like I'll do like a full rendering of a Pixar style movie in a few kilobytes. And it's like, it makes no sense, but they're doing it. And it's like, they love it, So yeah, anyway, I think it's also like trying to get people to learn this stuff and to get excited. And at the same time, it was designed for people who know what they're doing. So it's also like a little choice here to provide the pros first. And it turned out there were like a lot of people who wanted to do this. So it's cool.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Like Swift Playgrounds showed, hey, we can create tools for beginners too that we can teach in the process. Yeah. So the hand tracking, I love this part of the app. You said visionOS 1 didn't include this. I'd imagine part of why it didn't work as well as hand tracking wasn't as responsive back then. But there's this mode for one of the examples where you have like little ball globes and you can swap it out for cubes attached to your fingers, and it's fun just to like play around with that.
Yeah, that sample is funny because, you put the little balls at the fingertips, right? And whenever I was testing this, I'm guessing I'm not the only one, when I was testing it and I was typing to change the code, I just felt awkward. I was like, it's something on my fingers. I just can't type properly. Yeah. It's ridiculous. The hand tracking stuff is cool. It got better with visionOS 2. They did not, I mean, it's hard, to be honest, but they did not do super well on visionOS 1. And they basically, so the way this kind of stuff works is you want to be, like high fidelity estimation of like where your fingers are going to be. Like it's prediction. You can't just measure like where they are, and then because between the time you do this and the time it goes to your eyes, on the display, there's like a little time frame, which is very small, but big enough to be significant for, high frame rate, high frame rate simulation, basically. So they have to predict in the future. And so that's something they added, basically. It's like, okay, well, we'll predict where the fingers are and everything. And the systems...
You can try to beat Apple's prediction, if you want to.
Yeah, and the systems, they're trying their best, but like if you move quickly, and you do like go back, like some jerky movement, whatever, like there's only so much they can do. Like they'll like, okay, there's a vector of force going that way, of movement going that way, sorry. So most likely he's putting that hand, on that following that vector, but maybe not. Maybe I'm playing Beat Saber and I'm actually gonna do some crazy like quick movement, and then it's gonna completely not work, right? And to be frank, when I compared the result from Apple's tracking and Meta, I think Meta, like they have to do with what they can find off the shelf from the hardware perspective. They go to Samsung, whatever, like Qualcomm. And they're like, hey, what's the best you have that we could use? And Samsung is not going to give it. We were talking earlier about like, oh, it takes 2 years to build hardware, right? Or more than that, probably. So Samsung is not going to give them the flagship or unreleased stuff. They'll be like, here's what we have right now, and you can buy this for X. And then meanwhile, they're going to release the N+1 or N+2 thing. And again, because Facebook is also building the Quest, and also takes years, they have to lock in like an old thing. Like it's going to be like the previous generation of SoC or whatever. And so where Facebook, sorry, I keep saying Facebook, Meta, I guess, where Meta actually was like really good is, they had very good engineering. And well, again, Carmack, people like, it's not the only person, but like, there's so many good people there, but they take what they have, which is not great, and then they just have some actual wizard doing some crazy software and firmware stuff to just make it work. And so Meta, on the other hand, like they do have pretty good software in terms of like the tracking, the rendering quality, stuff like that. Like they actually go way beyond. Like Quest, actually, I know the folks who worked on 90 hertz. That feature was like sounded impossible. It was like, can you do like it's old hardware, 90 hertz? It's like such a short time frame. And they did it. They found a way. And it's like, wow, it's insane.
So a core part of your app is the actual code editor. So you're writing code and the shaders are being reflected live. What are you most proud of in the actual code editor as you're writing that code? Like it can be tricky to, write a good use text editor or whatever.
Yeah, so actually it's kind of like the main feature where like if the text editors or code editor I should say like doesn't work, you're screwed. Like it's just not going to be a good experience. I actually that was one of the major issue I stumbled upon because it's very silly, but because I'm French American, I sometimes use French, and so I use this keyboard mode, which is international. US International. And US International basically lets you use like a quote to do accents or whatever weirdness we have in French. And actually I like it because it's seamless for me to type that way and everything. So I use this for like forever, and I was like very frustrated because unknowingly, as I was developing the code editor, and I was looking at open source, solutions, because that's the other thing. If you want to make your own code editor, that is like a complete new can of worm. It will take you like years of like, making it work, especially if you start from nothing. Like it's a year-long project, multi-year-long project, actually. So you have to kind of look at the open source community, see what they have. And I was looking at like some of the top stuff. Actually, one of the app that's one of the top app on visionOS right now is Rune Editor, I think it's called.
Yeah, RuneScape.
And
yeah.
RuneScape, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So actually that is like partially open source. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, this is like one of the best one. And it just didn't work. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why is this garbage? Like, it just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And so I tried a lot of stuff. I even went into like some very old, like C++ hardcore text editor, that were like allegedly like super good. And just, that was like pretty too much. But like, yeah, a lot of stuff was not working. And I was like, this is making me crazy. Like I must be like, it's spatial computing. Like surely Apple like is aware of this. Like this it can. And then I was testing it. So in their stuff, it was not working super well. And then I figured out after months, which is also something that kind of delayed the launch. It was a bug with the international mode. So if you use QWERTY, regular QWERTY, it's perfectly fine.
So I know Simon's like based internationally. So in Europe somewhere, so I'm sure he uses some kind of weird keyboard, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit less used or something, and I was like, God damn it, this is why it didn't work. So I filed, a little report, and then I was like, just so relieved because like, okay, now like QWERTY, which is perfectly fine for me, it was like, okay, that works, and I can actually deliver this. If anyone complains, and no one did, by the way, I'll just let them know that it's a special edge case that I encountered. And I think they fixed it right now. But anyway, so point is, yeah, like I once this was found out, like, okay, it's a bug, which, it's a new system, so it happens. I was like, okay, let's find like the best thing I can find right now on the open source community to get it out, because I was already kind of late on shipping it. And so I'm using this open source thing, which is called CodeMirror. CodeMirror, so some people might hear this and be like, the reason why they will feel that way is because it is a web editor. So like basically you have browser view, which is a common thing people do in apps. You put a browser view, and browsers are like pretty much like multi-purpose engine, like game engine, rendering engine, any text engine, download engine, audio engine, everything. It's magical nowadays. But I was like, okay, let's just benchmark how good this is. I can actually have a good experience using this. Is it going to be laggy and anything? It was fine. And I was like, okay, well, the trade-off of quality, it actually does the syntax coloring. It has some cool little geeky editing features, which I can talk about later, and then good performance. So I was like, okay, perfect. Let's just do this, ship it. If people complain again, I'll just think about it. But yeah, so that was like actually one of the core thing, and I was like very relieved to find out like it was just a bug, and I could actually get this this nice experience. And I'm also very proud to say I think the app itself is like just a few megabytes. It's a cool little thing, but at the end of the day, like megabytes doesn't matter. It's also like the performance. Like you can have like the kilobyte application we talked about earlier, but just terrible performance. So yeah, it was a good trade-off, and I think people seem to like it so far.
That's cool. And how complex does the code get in these kind of projects? Like I know some templates have multiple pages, and like what all goes on here?
Yeah, so I think for this question, it's tricky. Like these projects can be as simple as you want them to be. Actually, I think this probably like kind of like there's something called like code golf. I don't know if you heard of this. Code golf is when you try to do a program solve a problem with the least amount of code. And sometimes it's like ridiculous one line of code that can do the thing, and you're like, this is magic. But anyway, so there are people who love doing that, but then of course, like the trade-off is you lose sometime, and most often, like it's just very confusing because like it's like very cryptic. It's like this little mental and like little tricks to get things to work. But yeah, it's not going to be, I think, the smallest project, but that's not too big because I think once you go too big, you start to basically making an application. Like it's just like you go beyond, when you do prototyping, it's often like not much code and pretty messy because you're kind of like, playing around, like things change a lot. So like it's hard to, like in engineering, you might have like the knee-jerk reaction of like, I need to structure things nicely, do my little architecture, whatever. You can't really do that here. Sometimes you just have to write stuff and see how it works, and it will be pretty messy. So I think like most code will be maybe a couple like what you call pages, because you have to do two type of shaders to get things on the screen, and then again, open source. You can always like find some cool libraries that help you do, for example, like noise or some other tricks. There's all these different techniques you can do for shader rendering. And there's like people doing really cool libraries to basically abstract that for you. So you can just say like, oh, do a square, sorry, do a cube there, do a whatever, instead of writing like, okay, let's do the math equation for that. No, just do a cube right there. That's the kind of stuff that exists. So what you can do is just, like, okay, copy paste that into one of the tabs or file, and then just forget about it. And then your actual program is just, like built on top of it. And so like it can be just a few lines, right? So I'm trying to be like very agnostic in terms of, I'm not bundling all these like different libraries. I think I only have one or two, which is pretty much like a math library, which is unfortunately like it's pretty standard, and it's like that's one of the thing that Metal doesn't have, and I'm guessing it's because they're trying to also not be too opinionated as they say in the community, but just like some basic stuff that you might need for a program. So I just add that into the libraries. But yeah, people could bring whatever they want, and then actually when I do like some stuff with noise, so noise is just kind of like how you do the different randomness, for the pixel, whatever. So I use someone's very very smart code to do this, and I just say hey, noise here. So yeah, I think it's kind of the bottom line, and for simple stuff, I think you don't need too much code either.
Yeah. Anything else worth sharing about the code editor? As a non-developer, I found it fun to go in the inspector and change like the geometry, which is just in the UI there.
I think so you're asking about ShaderVision, right? So I was thinking like in general, but so I think for me, so there's two sides of the design here. Like one is again like okay, like do the big request of like doing some tutorial, something for beginners. I think it was like a big one. The other one was the complete opposite of the spectrum. Someone was like, I want to do this like hardcore shader type that you don't support. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's there. And I know it's supported by the other guys. And I think I could do it. It's just, once you add more complexity like this, you have to also stay consistent to make sure things work. It is still like pretty low level, if I may say so. So like, if you have a GUI like I do, like it still has to make sense. Like you can't just put some insane like fields or inputs for the UI. If you have to still make something that, from a design standpoint, makes sense. Like I said, I think more samples for sure, because right now it's authored by me. The reason why I'm doing this is, first of all, time, and second, Apple is always a bit wary when you start to bring user-generated content, because now you have to do all these new things, which is very well done, by the way. Like I think we talk about regulation, like in the world for AI, whatever. Apple also has all regulation for developers. So, for example, they'll say like, okay, you're bringing content from people, so now we have to do a report. Like if someone feels like something is offensive, like you can report it, and then it has to be like taken into account and maybe taken down. Like basically all these different things have to be done. So it's like a long list of work when you start to do UGC, user-generated content. Then there's audio. I think audio is a big one. That actually is going to be the next thing I really want to work on. I just watched Apple's new music video from the weekend. Open
freaking
Hearts.
Cool! I watched that last night. The weekend.
Yeah,
it was like it's a music video. Yes. And wow, is that a trippy experience? Like this is surreal what they're doing here.
So I see these experiences, and I think in my head, I'm like, okay, if I add video support and audio support, I think we could do some sort of variant of that. Not as good, because obviously this is like a professional work, like cameras and everything, and the sound is perfect, whatever. But we can do some cool stuff. And so that's also something that sounds very exciting to me. And in the vein of people who want to just come in, relax, and watch some cool stuff, I think that could be a platform. And it's also a differentiator, because you can do this in an immersive way. So it's even more special. I mean, this music, if you watch it on a 2D medium, like a computer, whatever, it's still good. But I think, just the immersive thing just makes you really emotionally connected to this person, and I mean, I'm not gonna go in details on that video, but like it's just like pretty intense, and you're there, and it's like, wow, I was really touched by it. It was like really beautiful. So
the road morphing
being able to do
was
this,
quite the moment in the video for those gonna watch it. It's crazy.
Yeah. So be able to do something like that, like I can bring my audio, my video, and I can do some cool effects. That sounds pretty exciting to me. And then the last thing would be. So this is something for Apple, if you're listening, Apple. It's not so controversial. I say we'll talk about controversial stuff here, but the video frame. So right now, when I say video frame, I mean the pass-through video. So like what the user sees. So this is a controversial thing because privacy, basically, it's extremely intrusive. Like you basically give access to people's home, or what they're looking at. It's very sensitive data. And currently they give it to enterprise. I actually have a certificate for that, so I could play a little bit with it. But there was no point in going too far for me right now, because I wanted to focus on consumer stuff. But once we have this kind of stuff, we talked about like what's going to be the next thing for Vision Pro. That is one of the things, if properly done, that will bring like another layer of magic to the platform. And for Quest, Meta, they are so aware of that too. They actually are so looking into it. They didn't just flip the switch right away, because same thing, it's very tricky to give the frame like that. And some people found workaround. It's kind of nerdy, but like you can apparently do a casting of your app to a different app, and then get the frame from that. And it was like not okay, but anyway.
Yeah.
So once we have the pass-through video, that's also next level, because one thing we did at TikTok was capture your face, the mesh of your face, and then we also have the texture of the camera, right? Because on the phone it's okay to do that, and then you can remap, basically kind of like if you do a game, except the game, the texture of the face is your face, if that makes sense. So from there you can do some very cool stuff, and you can literally change your world. You can literally make there's some non-realistic stuff on Twitter right now where people do some Gen AI on video. So like it's like, oh, I'm gonna change my video to a forest or to Candyland or to some like cartoon world, and offline it works. Like yeah, I can take my video file, whatever time it takes to convert that, is probably like seconds or whatever, which is not like the 16 or less millisecond for VR. And then yeah, it looks cool. So in real time, not sure, but we could do stuff like that, and that's gonna be like just really cool. So I hope it happens next year.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, hopefully the enterprise thing this year is Apple testing the waters and they figure out how to do it more privately for everyone next year. So, and the app is free to get started with, and then just $10 to unlock the full app. What's kind of locked away behind that $10 unlock?
Yeah, so when I made this app, I just felt like maybe it's not a good business decision, but I just don't really like paid upfront. I believe in making apps where people can kind of like try first, get their, like dip their feet a little bit, see what's going on. And then if they want, they can like support or purchase if they want to get like the next level, whatever. If you do that, you do have to make a compelling case, which is difficult because the friction increases. Like any friction in the system is always going to be the difficult part. So you have to make a good case, and you just have to like not be like these sketchy apps where like just putting in your face like at the worst time, trying to like, oh, do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? It's like so obnoxious, right? So no thanks. So yeah, it was, and I saw it's so niche. I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna also be like just realistic. Like this is probably not gonna make much money, so might as well just make it more accessible. But if people feel like it's cool, I'll give the option to let them support me. So the app is basically fully functional as is. Like you can just use it like, for free. There is like Code Life, by the way, there is some nagging. So like every, I think 20 projects or whatever, like it will be like, oh, actually, when you open it the first time and then every 20 projects, whatever, it will be like, hey, this is free. And here's a little timer for 10 seconds. I'm sorry, but then you can use it. It's okay. So that's the one thing I do. And so if you buy it, you don't have the nagging anymore. And the nagging is also like this little like shiny little button for buying. So it's just like, if you're like a bit OCD or something, you're like, I don't want this button here. I just want my pure interface, So it's maybe a little trickier, but and so the other thing is it brings some extra features. So I talked earlier about like the code editor having some little nerdy stuff. So there's this thing called like Vim and Emacs. It's like some very popular editing tools in the terminal, and also some other text editor. And it's like for people who actually spend the time to learn how to do this like key chords, whatever, on the keyboard, to be like typing without the mouse, whatever. So that's actually to some extent enabled. If you can enable it, if you purchase it, and then you can also, of course, customize the look and feel. So you can change the color of the editor. You can make it like very matrix style, like like black and green kind of thing. So it's kind of so much like so it's kind of like unnecessary, but if you know you need it, you can spend the extra $10 and be like, okay, I got this. It's cool.
Yeah. Have you considered adding some crazy shader that goes off when you hit the buy button? Like your room around you, some shader, because you're in a shader. Like you could probably do that. I don't know, maybe as a thing.
Wait, what does shader do exactly? Can you describe it better?
Like Happy New Year type thing, when it's, you send that, like the iMessage effects. I was thinking like when you hit the buy button, you finish the purchase, like some kind of shader.
That is a good idea. Yeah. That's actually, I guess, a good idea. There's so many apps that do that. Like it's a small little thing that the developer, like the user spend the extra time and money to buy your app, and the developer is like, I'm going to reward that by a little special thing.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're so right.
And the app itself is shader, so it's a natural fit too,
Yeah, that's true. But you don't want to, okay, the other thing is like people who use this app, they might be like very peculiar about like, I want to have the GPU to myself. Like I want to do the crazy shader. So like if you dare to take milliseconds from me, not cool,
Right, yeah.
So maybe they'll be like, no, probably not. But like they'll be like, oh, this guy just showed the fireworks. No thanks.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, you're right. I think it could be fun.
Yeah.
So it's a delight. It's cool.
And then gallery and template files for like future updates. I imagine you'd like to add additional ones. Is like creating a matrix view of the world something that's copyrighted, or is that something that, because you can't look at the camera, but you can look at the mesh of your room? So
Yeah, I saw them on X, yeah, and LinkedIn and stuff. Yeah, there's people doing that. I think there's even an app that literally does that. Like it's just, you can transform your world into Matrix. Yeah, you can do this. I don't. If I do it or someone does it, I'm sorry, I don't mean to kill that app. But maybe they do stuff differently. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's possible. Without going technical, there's some little things missing right now to make it right. But it's possible. Yeah,
Okay.
we could do the Matrix thing. Yeah, definitely.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Have you gotten feedback from? You obviously have from people using your app, sharing like some of their creations they've made in your app. Like what have you seen out there from people using the app to create things?
Yeah, I think people so far. That's one of the weak point of the app. Yeah, the sharing is not easy because, and so speaking of friction earlier, right? Like if we had the pass-through frame, it also gives me the opportunity to generate a video, generate a thumbnail. Right now, I cannot do this because, well, I can, but it will not be with the background. Like you will just, if you have a fully again VR experience, where like it's a black or whatever, you don't see the video see through. It's okay, but most people I think want to do that, so then it doesn't make sense. And then yeah, because there's no like integrated way to share like your own stuff. I think honestly, I might consider adding it because there's actually like more users than I thought. Not like that too many, but there's definitely some people, and it just really reinforced. I think it creates a community. It inspires people to be like, oh, that guy did this. It's cool. And there's, like I said, like there are people like much better than me at doing this too. So there could be better content than what I offer right now. So yeah, I think it's. I've seen some stuff that was mostly like in private message, and I haven't seen people like post except for like quick demos of like, oh, I've used this app and here's what it looks like. But yeah, some people were like, okay, I actually use this for work because I have to do prototyping, and my environment doesn't have this quick iteration thing. So I actually use your app because it's much better. And I'm like, great, I'm happy I can help you get productive. Maybe I should move my app to productivity. I don't know. But yeah, and people learning, of course, people are like kind of like they're doing a little playground. They probably don't do anything to. I mean, when you build something yourself, it always feels nicer. It's always like this little like extra % of satisfaction when it can be like identical to something you might find off the shelf, but like because you did it, you'll be like, wow, I'm so proud of myself. I did this. So there's probably people who do like, like not so great things, but they're just happy about it and they don't feel like they need to share. So yeah, so I think, again, like if we get the video frame from the camera, that would be something I would probably add right away to again, like remove the barrier of sharing and stuff like that.
Very cool. Yeah. And then I did notice there's Discord for this. Is it active? Like what's the kind of community like there for those running in the walls as they're creating code? Are there people that are good at helping brainstorm solutions and stuff?
Yeah. So it's not big, honestly. I was actually comparing numbers just for fun. I was like, okay, let's look at the other guys, like what they have. So to give you an idea, I think there's like 60 plus people on the Discord, which is, to me, it's perfectly fine. Like it's actually a good number for something like that. And then you look at some more popular stuff. For example, Shader Park, which is a very specialized framework for JavaScript, so web, to do, again, shader programming, but like they abstract a lot of stuff for you, so you can actually do these cool effects with just a little bit of code. So these people have like 600, so it's like 10x, right? And then I look at the OG, well, not CodeLife, but like OG, like Shader Toy, which is also web-based, which has been like very popular for people to share and do some stuff. That one has 6,000, so like again, 100x. So now I have an idea of where it can go. But obviously, it's also like a fun project. It's it's not something I'm trying to make much money or whatever out of it. But like, I would love to have a community. I'm always there when someone comes in. I just talk with them. Usually it's like a burst of like someone coming in, like, oh, I'm trying to do this, and then I just right away reply. And I think people actually like that. Like people like when they get some feedback from the developers. It's like, oh, like I feel like I'm being heard. I feel like I can get what I want from this app. It's like in this world of like big software, like all these big companies making this stuff. It's really rare that you get to talk to the developers unless you go to the expensive conferences or maybe you get lucky, someone, like it's hard. So like I think this kind of stuff is what makes it so special, like make it special for the users. That being said, it can also quickly go out of it can be very difficult for the developers then to handle if it becomes too popular. Like the guy who made Shader Toy, Inigo, he's still there. He's still making stuff, but I think he, to some extent, like offloaded the like community management to someone else.
Makes sense, because
he doesn't really do support.
Yeah,
and he has a full-time job too. Like he was doing this purely for fun. Like he's a math wizard, so he loved to do like art with math. And he's not doing the support, and even like the feature, like the website, which is also what led me to do this. The website like has a VR support, but it just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for a long time. So I was like, hey, I think someone should kind of make this work and do it a bit more better design. So that's kind of what I tried to do. Then there's also like people who might. For this type, I think it's fine, but like sometimes like when you have like the developer talking like directly. It can also be a little bit of abuse. Like people might be like, "Oh, that guy's doing my work for free," kind of thing. So you have to find a balance. But for now, it's been perfectly fine. The people who talk to me, like super cool. Very happy that I'm here to answer, and they have no expectation whatsoever. So that's okay.
Yeah, and this exists purely as a visionOS app. There's no like iOS version, right?
So the iOS version would be CodeLife. CodeLife is, again, the 2D version of that, works on Mac and iOS. So technically, I could, but I think my software wouldn't be as relevant to what he offers, or that person offers, sorry. And I did think about making a Quest version. Actually, I'm still thinking about it. It's just, again, this project for my company is still a company, right? I need to do like what I say 50-50, right? So like the 50% has been kind of reached for 2024. So I'm like, okay, I love this project. It's fun. But I also have to be realistic and do some other stuff too. And also just for myself, like I like the context switch, like do different things. I think it's really cool to stay like curious and motivated, especially with solo dev, right? So Quest I think would be cool. And they also recently finally improved their developer ecosystem. That's one of the, in my opinion, it was one of the weakest point of
like you don't have to make a fake game to make an application anymore. Because I think you have to use some like gaming engine, right, for every game. Like
exactly.
To make Skype, you have to run it in a game engine.
Exactly. So the happy path for Meta platform was a game engine. So like Unity, Unreal, that was the two main entry points. If you looked at anything else, which I did, I just felt like when I looked at the native code stuff, it was like going back to work there. I was like, wow, it's like this hardcore C++ code. Like we talked about number of lines earlier, like thousands of lines for like the simplest thing. And it's like, it's going to crash. It's going to be terrible. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this. But now they actually look at Apple and they were like, oh, look at this Swift UI stuff. And they can do, people who do iOS apps, iPad apps can do apps on a 2.5D, 3D platform, right? So maybe we should do that too. So they now did something like that with their Spatial SDK, I believe it's called. And I was curious to look at it. It's kind of like the Swift UI of Android. It's called Kotlin. It's people like it apparently. I haven't really looked at it because I'm not too much into Android. But I'm probably going to spend some time on that. And if I do, maybe it's going to be like the same story of like, oh, I'm ramping up on the platform and I'm going to accidentally build an app, and then here it is. But then now it's going to be like, okay, two platforms to support, so it's a bit more difficult. I have to build abstraction to avoid like repeating the code. And so it's a whole trade-off. Also, again, I feel very spoiled saying this, but like when I go back to Quest 3, I'm just like, man, this display, it's just not as good. I don't know if like my eyes can handle text on this.
It's good for gaming, but for once you get in the work, like it's not the same.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I think they do, but in terms of like supporting like the keyboard and mouse and how that integrates to the system, I'm not sure. Meta is not as good for like consistency of their developer tools, user experience. Like it's kind of like the Wild West sometimes, and they love to, again, because Meta is like built in public kind of philosophy. Like they will be like, oh, there's a new beta thing. Turn on in the settings like this weird setting that puts your hand, and now it's like a thing for all the apps, and it was not for a long time. It's just a bit more messy, and so if you want to do something there, gaming usually works, but the rest is tricky. But I think they're so opening up to the idea of, initially, like Meta, when they're doing this, it was like, oh, connect people, that's kind of the Facebook thing, right? Like, oh, metaverse, whatever. And I think then they realized, okay, we just built like the Switch, Nintendo Switch of VR, basically, and it's like selling so well, and gaming is doing so well after many years of not doing so well, and now they're actually making profits on that. But end of the day, it's a very metric-driven company. Like they ruthlessly look at the metrics and make decisions based on that. It's sometimes very cold. Recently, actually, sorry, I don't mean to bash on them, but recently they killed Spark AR, Metaspark, which was a tool to make AR effects on Instagram and other platforms. And there was a huge community of people doing this. Actually, even businesses built on top of that. And from one day to the other, like, sorry, it's gone. And even the effects are going to be gone. Like, like if you build all this cool stuff on Instagram, it's gone. So obviously they're going to build something else for the glasses. That's their roadmap. But they just, from one day to the next, just killed it. Like it was like
sounds like a Google a Google thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Like the Google it's really funny because you would think Google is one of the top company to do this stuff, like the VR, XR, whatever. But
yeah. Yeah, and with Quest and Meta, they blew up during the pandemic because I think a lot of people are stuck at home when we get a Quest 2. I'll be curious with the Quest 3. I know it's successful, but I wonder if it'll be like a hard to replicate experience, with like PlayStation 2, everyone bought it for the DVD player instead of gaming, actually. And we're just only now getting to those levels with Switch, being a handheld, getting up to those levels. And will Quest 2 ever replicate the pandemic experience of a lot of people just bought it because it's pandemic and it's cheap and,
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, are you able to share anything about the next big update you're working on for ShaderVision?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, what I talked about earlier, like, the little feature for audio, video. If there's anything with video pass-through, that would be like, that's a top priority for me because I think it's just like, that is like a killer feature and it hasn't been done before. So that would be really fun. And then maybe, I'll get to work and do the sharing stuff. But I think that will come at the point because, something else, so I actually enjoy web programming. To me, it's like Zen because I mean it's a complex field. Like you can go like pretty deep into it. But for me, like I do like very simple websites using React and whatever. And to me, it's like very Zen. Like I feel like I can code without thinking too much. But then what I'm doing is like static websites because it's like it loads super quickly. It's like the successor of like PHP where like you just drag and drop a file. It just shows up on your server, whatever. So with React, it's a bit more complicated, but there's ways to do that. So I built all my websites that way, like it's just, pretty much static websites. But like the moment you do sharing, user management, now you have to have a real server, database, like security, whatever. And I'm like, I'm a bit lazy to do this, but I know how to do it. It's just if I don't have to, I'm not going to do it. But I think I'll, at some point I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to start doing this little platform for my projects. And then ShaderVision will get its little account system for that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's about it. If folks want to try Pulsargeist, it's still pretty early. I'm going to add more stuff as well on that game. There's two things I want to change on that game. One is add a little lore update. So like basically there's like 50% of the story right now. I know it's probably a bit too much. Maybe I'm thinking too much about this, but there's like some cool idea I have about the game and how it could go in terms of like why are we teleported into this dark universe, whatever. Like it's kind of fun to think about that. And also, which I think is very interesting to me, the designing application for, again, multi-room VR is difficult. So I'm kind of like uncovering challenges here, and it's very fun to solve. So I have a whole new system I'm building to basically map. So video games, usually what they do, 3D games, is, you have an environment, especially if it's open world, whatever. Like you have an environment, you can kind of like walk around, and there's always bugs where like people like clip through walls or go into the nether, like things like that. And there's some awesome speedrun, built out of that. I'm a big fan of speedruns.
I know Assassin's Creed Unity, people were falling through the floor.
These games are like yes, like Gruyere cheese. Like there's holes everywhere. It's just, same for Skyrim. It's just like, oh my god, so funny. So what they do usually is they have these things to map the walkable area, like where you can go, not go, this kind of stuff. So I'm basically building this, but for the real world, which is kind of weird. Like I look at my apartment, I'm like, oh, this is the walk map of my apartment. It's just so weird.
And in most VR headsets, it's a single room that you scan initially versus Vision Pro. It's continually scanning and allowing you to do multi-room, which is a first, really.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have the Guardian, it's kind of like given to you, like it's like this little. So it's not just it used to be, I guess, just a square. Like a cube, I guess, technically. But now it's like arbitrary line that people can draw. But it still is drawn by someone, so it's kind of like a fixed in space kind of thing. But now it can evolve, so like, things might change. There's so many different type of rooms, as I found out. People DM me on X and whatever, say, hey, love the game, but here's an orb that is on my balcony, and I'm not gonna go collect something on my balcony in the dark. Or here's the mirror, and mirrors are like the worst enemy of XR, by the way. The mirror the game thought it was a new room, but it's not a room. I cannot step in the mirror. I'm sorry. It's not, so, okay. So how do you fix that? So it's, or like in my place, it's like the kitchen is like elevated. So it's like a step. And right now in the current version, the step is like, yeah, sure, go there in the dark, no problem. Don't fall, of course, but, go there. So like now I'm like, okay, I'm making a system that's like, okay, let's not put the user there unless we have to, So yeah, it's a whole interesting technical challenge to fix, and I think it just makes the game better, and then we'll be able to use that for future projects as well. So yeah, definitely stuff to look forward here, and I'm also porting it to Quest, so that's going to take some time too. But yeah, it's the platform for games, so I have to port it there too.
Right, absolutely. So where can people follow you online and learn more about ShaderVision and this awesome game?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of social media, but you unfortunately have to use it for this kind of stuff. So I am on, for now, like a lot of platforms, but I think the one where I'm the most active is X and Thread. And I've been actually getting into Blue Sky recently. I actually like it too. So I would say, yeah, like these 3 platforms. I also have Instagram, whatever, but there's nothing there. So if you really want to talk to me, whatever, I think X, Blue Sky, and Threads are the main one. Or message by email if you're old-fashioned.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, and I'll link to those in the show notes for those interested. Well, thank you.
And, the handle is SXP Studio, SXP Studio. Yeah. Anyway.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you, Clem. Really appreciate your time today. Learn more about ShaderVision and all of your background with Apple and everything. It's been fascinating.
Well, thanks for having me, Tim. And looking forward to the next podcast with awesome guests.
Well, that's my interview with Clem. My thanks to Clem for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.